All right, time for a little update here. What I want to cover right now is going to be what I'm doing to the motor for 2021. These are going to be my build plans, my upgrade path, what I'm changing, and why I'm changing it. As you can see, I'm in the middle of my motor swap, and I have got the transmission separated today. So we can take a look and kind of see what condition everything's in, and then I'll go over my upgrades for 2021. Well, before we talk about changes for 2021, let's take a look at a couple of the things that were on this car for extended periods of time and see how they held up. I know the big one that everyone's always curious about is how do these 6 pucks hold up? How long do they last? What's the life like? And what's the wear like? So this setup here, ACT 6 pucks, sprung hub. I think I have the straight light flywheel, or I don't even know what this is, but there you go. Do we have any kind of markings or anything on here? I mean, you guys can probably look up these part numbers if you really want to know if this is a street light or a whatever, but I don't know if you can even see that. But anyways, so this clutch setup has been in the car for about 55,000 kilometers. So I'll put up on the screen what that is in miles. But anyways, all of those kilometers, all 55, were kind of rough. This motor saw a lot of stop and go when I first bought the car and I was driving it daily. So this would sit in traffic pretty much for an hour and a half as I made my way home. Stop and go, stop and go. And the only thing I can say that I noticed with the 6 puck is once you get some heat into the pads and into the pressure plate and the flywheel and everything's hot from constantly engaging, disengaging, engaging, disengaging, trying to creep, these pads start to grip harder and you start to lose that little bit of window. These clutches, they don't engage like a switch. There is a slight slip window where you can kind of play. Now it's very small and there isn't a ton of engagement room there, but there is some. When these get hot, when this sits in stop and go creeping around, that engagement disappears. There's none of that. It's on and off. It's more or less instant. That's in my experience anyways. So that sucked. I hated it for that. Where I loved this setup was obviously on the track, on the back roads, pretty much anywhere else. I mean, it lasted what I thought's a decent life. I mean, 55,000, and it probably have another 10 to 15,000 kilometers left in it. Because I mean, even the flywheel, like it's got some grooves, some kind of deeper grooving there, just due to I guess the pads. They're kind of aggressive and abrasive. So I'm going to send out the flywheel to get machined, to get resurfaced, because that to me looks fine. The pressure plate, I have a new one, but even the pressure plate, like the wear isn't substantial. I mean, it's nothing crazy. You're not gonna, risk this clutch blowing up anytime soon. It would have been fine, but where we really want to look is kind of at how much material is left here, how much actual, Kevlar or whatever the material is that they use here. You can see we're getting kind of close to the rivets. So I would say this clutch would maybe last half a season. I don't even know if it would last a full season, to be brutally honest. So there's a little bit of life there, but I think it's done. I mean, it's time to replace this. So I picked up a new 6 puck disc, nothing crazy there. I picked up a new pressure plate. Again, that wasn't too crazy either, not that expensive, the whole setup. I got a new throwout bearing, a new pilot bearing. I got the new the new pressure plate and the new clutch disc. The flywheel I'm just going to machine. It was 400 Canadian dollars for the whole setup. So pretty good. I think the money's here. This guy on its own is like, I don't know, a couple $100 American. So it's not cheap. But yeah, we can reuse that. There's nothing wrong with it. So I mean, that's kind of cool. The clutch held up pretty well. I'm really impressed. And honestly, I really love the 6 pucks. So it's cool that it lasted as long as it did. That's great. The next thing I want to go over that's going to be upgraded for 2021 for this upcoming season, I've got a new CSF AC condenser coming. This car is going to have AC retained because I like having it. I mean, I don't barely ever use it, but when the girlfriend's with me, sometimes I'll use it just to keep her happy. So to keep the peace, we're going to keep AC. It's not a huge deal. But anyways, as you can see here, this condenser has seen a long, hard life. Again, it's got about 135,000 kilometers on it, so not crazy high mileage, but just look at the beating it's taken over its life. And obviously, I'm sure I don't need to say this, but that's a huge flow restriction. I mean, you've got what, 20% of the bottom's completely gone. You got 10%, like there's 30-40% of this, you know, condenser isn't letting any air through to my radiator, and that's terrible. So I've got a CSF AC condenser to swap in here, nothing crazy there. But what I also picked up, just because I figured we're doing a cooling overhaul kind of anyways, we're going to build ducting, we're going to get crazy with it, picked up the coil radiator. So I have that's going to go in here as well. There was nothing wrong with the OEM radiator. Even the temperatures, I peaked around 240 on track, which is probably the upper limit. You don't ever want to stay that hot, but like just for, you know, peak number on the access port, 240, not the end of the world. What I've been told, based on some of the California track guys, the racers over there, they have the coil rad, and apparently it makes a big difference, 10 to 15 degrees lower. I'm talking Celsius here, so that's quite a bit. If I can get 10 to 15 degrees Celsius peak, you know, temperatures reduction, it's a lot. Instead of hitting 240, we're gonna hit, you know, 225, 230, and in my opinion, the motor can more or less live there. Now, this is the OEM motor that I've obviously just pulled out, and I kind of want to see what all this track abuse and use has done to it internally, but I'm gonna keep it together. This is gonna stay as a spare for a rebuild in the future, because I know that's nice unmolested block. It was well taken care of its whole life. Oh wow, it looks like little bit of coolant leakage might have been developed there. That's probably when we were hitting 240 degrees on track and you know, everything was freaking out. But anyways, yeah, so cooling overhaul, coil rad, because it's the only real option, and CSF radiator, AC condenser, sorry. So that's the cooling setup. The coil rad, I looked at it, it's not much thicker than the stock unit. The big benefits and the reasons why I went with it: number one, no more plastic end tanks. Those can fail, especially as coolant temps get high, and they remain high. So even if you're maintaining 230 for the whole day, let's say, it's a lot of pressure in the coolant system, a lot more than it's used to dealing with. Now, the cooling setup in these cars is pretty robust as is. Like even with the setup with my oil cooler in front and the intercooler in front, like I was able to run 15-minute sessions with, you know, I would have to kind of do a cool down in between here and there, but more or less it was fine. And that's impressive considering we've turned up the power like 100 wheel from stock. So stock cooling system is definitely no slouch. People who have issues, it's somewhere else. It's not your radiator, it's something else. But anyways, yeah, so that's one of the big upgrades for 2021, is just cooling, trying to keep everything cooler so that we can, you know, operate at peak power for longer. That's the main thing there. And really the last big change that we're gonna have with this new motor are the valve springs, giving me that little bit of extra RPM. So I always rev this motor to around 6,700. That's the stock limiter. That's what it was left at for safety. I know stock these can spin a little higher. 7 grand I think is kind of the safe limit, but with the beatings this motor, well, not this motor, but this motor was taking, I wanted to leave it kind of safer than sorry type thing. So it only had stock limiter. Now this has got the Crowler valve springs in it, which are good to 7,800 RPM. I'm probably going to spin it to 75. I think that's a good safe place to keep it at. We'll see what the tuner thinks when he starts tuning on it, and if he sees anything weird, you know, then we'll decrease RPM, or if he says all's good, then maybe we increase it. But I want around 74, 7,500 RPM, and it's not even because my turbo is going to be making any power up there. It's more so for gearing, to have that little bit of extra RPM at limiter. So this thing, 6-speed, pretty short gears. On the track, you use 3rd and 4th pretty much almost exclusively at the tracks I frequent anyways. And the frustrating part comes when you're on the straightaway and you've got the chicane. Maybe I'll put a picture here of me actually driving, or I'll cut in a video, whatever. But you're coming up to the chicane, you're in 3rd gear, you're 130 kilometers an hour, you're right at the tip of 3rd, you're pretty much smashing into limiter. I have to lift and then brake. And so there's a half a second there where I'm not on the power or the brakes. That's just time in the garbage, throwing time out. And so with that extra ability to rev, you know, that extra 3, 4, 5, 6, 700 RPM more, actually 6,700 to 7,500, 800 RPM more, I'm going to be able to stay in it. And that's the same with fourth gear. Instead of, you know, upshifting to fifth, coming down into fourth, and then, oh, now we got to go back into third to make the corner. It's a lot of shifting for no reason, and that actually slows you down. So that's the big upgrade here. Yeah, it's got forged rods and pistons, which I've covered a million times, and those are just obviously to support more torque, to bring the boost in sooner. And the kind of last changes for 2021. We're not going to bother going over my turbo because it's the GT30 with the external wastegate. You guys will see that when it's actually on the motor and it's all done. I'll do a little bit of walk around on what's going on. But anyways, real excited for these two because these are some real nice pieces. They're very hard to get in Canada. They're real expensive. Obviously I bought both of them used because nobody has money to buy this stuff brand new. Are you crazy? So anyways, JMF V2, what a trick setup. I've got 630cc injectors, and I've got the fuel rail and everything. It's going to be staying with stock fueling for this season. I'm not actually going to turn the PI on. I still need a watt box and some AN line and just a couple small pieces, not much, but I need a couple things to dial that in. So that'll be probably near the end of the season. I want to get through a season of competing with the stock fuel system, and just with the, you know, the whole fact that the motor is being swapped. You know, I'm sure there's going to be other little things I gotta kind of dink with, but JMF V2, look at these freaking ports, man. These are serious. So I'm real excited about this. I've wanted one of these for a really long time, and I told myself that I would never buy one because they're just way too expensive. But I had a buddy in the States who was parting out his car, and he gave this to me for a song. So I really can't say anything. It was a really big savings there. So the next piece, the exhaust manifold. We've got a CPE here. I picked it up from a local. He gave me a pretty good price on it because these are real expensive in Canada and they never come up for sale. So he posted his part out, and the second I saw CPE, that was it. I messaged him, I e-transferred to him, done deal. There was not even any deliberation. I was getting it. It was happening. So anyway, CPE exhaust manifold. I'm going to be running the wastegate on my turbo the way it is on the exhaust side. So I'm going to leave the plug in here, which he was running it with an internal gate. So this plug's been on forever. It's probably nice and sealed. Stock flange, because that's the flange that's on my hot side for my turbo. Honestly, with the new Cork Sport turbos making over 600 wheel on the stock flange, I'm not concerned with this restricting power in any way, shape, or form. Not for the power I'm trying to make. Kind of the weird thing with these CPEs, which I actually didn't know, apparently the welds here like to break and the flange falls off. Now, you got to think, if the weld's not perfect and you've got that heavy-ass turbo hanging from this flange, when this gets hot, yeah, it's kind of makes sense that it's going to break or crack or whatever, because the welds, they're not perfect. And it's a lot of weight supported solely by these welds. So I had my buddy weld over it, fixed all the welds, so there's no more cracks. It's mint now. But he also added these little supports. So these hold the flange to the actual manifold. So when there is weight on this and everything's hot and it's in its most fragile state, at least these will be taking a lot of the weight off it. They're not the prettiest things on earth, but honestly, this is a functional build. This is functional. I don't know what else to tell you. I'm going to get this manifold powder coated, or sorry, ceramic coated. Oh, I'm going to get it ceramic coated, obviously to try and keep some of the heat in it. But then I'm also going to be building a custom heat shield for it, just with some sheet metal, some stainless, just kind of bend something up nicely and find a way to mount it just to keep the heat, you know, inside of the manifold, as close to the manifold as possible. So I guess the last thing I want to cover, just as I'm cleaning up here and packing it in for the day, the reason why I'm changing the you know, the car the way I am, the mods that I'm doing, not really adding a ton of more power. Now the reason for that is in the series I compete in, Ontario Time Attack, the classing system is very tight. It's heavily based on power. That's the big thing, power to weight. If you make your car lighter, you're going to move up significantly. If you make more power, you're going to move up significantly. Now, currently, I'm classed pretty fairly, I want to say. I've classed myself using the new motor with all the mods I've done, and everything gets taken into consideration. You know, extra RPM, change in manifolds, like the downpipe. Like, you get dinged for everything when you do these series. So for me, that's why I'm leaving it like this. I'm not going to turn the port fuel on, because as soon as I do, if someone calls me out on that, like, it's game over, right? A lot of people, especially in the time attack scene, they don't know that these speeds are fuel limited, which is why when I put the turbo on, I got screwed right away. Oh, big turbo, you need to race with the Porsches and Ferraris and Corvettes. No, stock fuel, stock block. I'm not making any power. Let's be real here. And they don't know that, so they hit you pretty hard. Now, there are people who like to contest things. So if, let's say I were to hook up the port fuel, go and start slaying everybody, because now I'm making 400 wheel in a class where I should be making 350 wheel. Someone wants to say, hey, you know, you're making power, what's going on? All it takes is someone to do a little bit of Googling or a little bit of research, or even somebody under the age of like 40 there who might maybe know how direct injection works and Mazdaspeeds and Volkswagens. And, you know, there's a ton of these DI cars that use port injection to make more power. So anyone that has even a little bit of knowledge of that, if they call me on it, I'm screwed right away. So by not having any fuel lines hooked up to the rail, there's really no argument. Like, this is it. Stock fuel system, you know, here's the dyno, this is what the car makes. Like, there's no funny stuff pretty much. So after a year of competing, depending on how I do in my class, you know, I might run the port fuel next season and either bump up a class, or you know, if I can stay in the same class and add a little more power. I haven't played with that. There is kind of a calculator. You enter in your power numbers, plus all the other mods that are done to the car, and you hit calculate, and it tells you what class you're in. So pretty easy. I can put, you know, 350, 360, 370, 400, 410, just keep turning the power number up and see if I stay in my class or move up. The class that I'm currently in, I should be competitive. The car should be competitive, and me as a driver, I should also be competitive. So the whole build is basically built around the rules to stay in that class. So yeah, that's why I'm modifying the car the way that I am.